Good morning. It's so good to be here on this 17th anniversary. It's hard to believe that all those years ago, Reverend Dr. Sonny and I left behind everything we knew, left our friends, our comfort zone, my job, and embarked on a grand adventure. Made 2 trips across the country, one to bring Sonny in June, another one in September with 2 cats who hated to be in the car and made it across country. Thank God for Subway, delis, and gas stations. So one of us could sit in the car and one could stay and one could get the sandwiches. But and here's the thing: we moved here with some hopes and dreams and a little bit of money, and a few people here who shared our dream, some of whom are in this room today. And so if you were either in the living room or started coming here when we were in the little white church, can you just stand up? Yeah, you were there. Yeah. And so over the years, Ahava has served a lot of people. Some have come and gone, some are still here, and some have left and come back again. And so those people that were here that at the beginning, some of them are still here. And I want to especially thank Nancy Eisen and Deb Thielen, who isn't here today, who were busy dreaming the dream of having a place here while Sonny was busy dreaming the dream in California. And the Ethers brought everybody together to help co-create that dream. And there was a lot of stuff that went on before we got here. Visioning, Nancy is part of that visioning, and then there are people who gathered in a living room before Ahava even started. I know Marilyn was there and some others that were just holding that dream together. And throughout all those years and to now, people have held fast to the vision of what Ahava is and what it can be. And Ahava has evolved, and some people want it to grow and some people don't, and every organization evolves. It changes, it grows, it shrinks and transforms, and that's the way life works, right? We're not always the same in life. We grow, we shrink, we transform, we step outside of our comfort zone, because for all forms of life, stagnation is death. And so that brings me to our topic this week. The month of July, our topic is whole no matter what. And our weekly topic is a world that values all of who we are. And that's a big thing. CSL has a global vision. We've got 10 or 11 or 12 points. And the tagline of that vision, the end of it all, is a world that works for everyone and all of creation. That's a big thing. And to create that world, we have to create a world where that values each of us for who we are. But how do we do that? Who decides what works? Who decides who and what is worthy of value? So just take a moment. How many of us in this room feel as if who we are is valued everywhere we go? And how many of us value ourselves fully all of the time? Can you just take a moment and imagine what it might look like if we really did live in a world where everyone was valued? Where we let go of the idea that some people are more worthy of care than others because of their skin color, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, place of origin, ability, age, size, or any other way that we separate and devalue people. How do we get there? I think the first part is to cultivate honesty within ourselves. Ernest Holmes writes that our work begins within, but it doesn't stay there. We must carry that work into the world. But the work within has to come first, or at least in tandem with our outer work. We have to confront our hidden biases and beliefs about who is valuable and who isn't. These beliefs are inculcated in us from the moment we are born. They exist in the stories we are told about who we are as individuals and as a country. They exist in the way we view others. An author and activist I greatly admire is Adrienne Marie Brown. She writes a lot about emergent strategy and a new way of living. And she says we create the patterns of our society through our choices, beliefs, and practices. As such, the path to a future in which humans can be in an authentic and accountable peace with each other is fractal. We must be willing to practice authenticity and accountability at the small scale of ourselves and our lives, both in ourselves and our immediate relationships. A healed society, she says, would be the one in which no one becomes the bearer of unjust hardship, where individuals don't bear the weight of systemic failures. To create a healed society where everyone is valued for who they are requires being accountable to ourselves and others for our behavior, building relationships based on authenticity and vulnerability, setting healthy boundaries, and making amends. It's pretty easy, right? Just do it. That's what Nike said, just do it. Too often, though, we relate to people based on our stereotypes, unconscious biases, and hidden beliefs. We label people and then dismiss them based on those labels. And remember, there's research that shows that we get an impression of, we make an opinion about someone within 1/10 of a second of meeting them. So that's an automatic process that relies on our hidden beliefs and biases. So when we label people and then dismiss them based on those labels, we dehumanize them, which makes it easier to discount them and easier to either cause them harm directly or tolerate harm caused by others. And we do this individually in the United States. We do it as a nation, and other nations do it as well. Undocumented immigrants, human beings fleeing persecution and oppression who try to come to the United States for a better life, get labeled as illegal aliens or just illegals, and are depicted as faceless, nameless hordes invading the United States. You might think to yourself, I don't do these things, but you do. I do. We all do. And I'm not an alcoholic, but I have lots of friends who are, and I've read the big book many times. And I think even if you're not an alcoholic or don't have another addiction in your life, that it's got a lot of really great stuff in it. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, step 4 talks about taking a fearless and searching moral inventory of ourselves. And there are a lot of similarities between what's in the big book and what Ernest Holmes writes. And apparently there's some question that they might have influenced each other. And in the beginning of step 4 in the big book, it reads, creation gives us instincts for a purpose. Without them, we wouldn't be complete human beings. If people didn't exert themselves to be secure in their persons, made no effort to harvest food or construct shelter, there would be no survival. If we didn't reproduce, the earth wouldn't be populated. If there were no social instinct, if people cared nothing for the society of one another, then there would be no society. So these desires for the sex relation, for material and emotional security, and for companionship are perfectly necessary and right, and surely God-given. Yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, often exceed their proper functions. Powerfully, blindly, and many times subtly, they drive us, dominate us, and insist on ruling our lives. Our desires for sex, for material and emotional security, and for an important place in society often tyrannize us. And so that's in the big book, and that sounds very much like something Ernest Holmes might have written, right? So we can use what we're given for good or for ill. And many of us live as if they were limited good and believe that if anyone else tries to take what we have, we think is ours, they're the enemy. If they get more, I get less. That's why so often people we want to demonize are depicted as takers. You know, there's the welfare queen and all these ways that people talk about others as if they're takers and they don't contribute anything to society. And so underneath all of this is often fear that drives our reactions. And politicians, religious leaders, TV talking heads feed on that fear to keep us divided. I'm old enough to remember the media coverage during the Vietnam War. We used to watch the news every night. I won't repeat the words that were used to describe people, but derogatory names were used for Vietnamese people by newscasters, in written media, and by military personnel. And those names were used to dehumanize Vietnamese people to make it easier to kill them indiscriminately. Earlier in the history of this country, before it was even a country, the indigenous populations of the Americas were labeled as less than human. And within 100 years of the first Europeans setting foot on the American soil, what became American soil, 95% of the indigenous population was gone. Part of this was made possible by the fact that the Catholic Church decreed that because indigenous populations weren't baptized Christian, they didn't have a soul, and so they weren't human, and so they could be killed. So this is a feature, not a bug in our system. It's the way our system has been designed from its inception. We're taught who to value and who to discard. And think of something really simple. Think of how there are a lot of people like to watch the TV show Hoarders. We label people who hoard material objects, magazines, newspapers, books, as crazy. But we label people who hoard money geniuses. There's enough money in this world to feed, clothe, and give everyone a good life if it wasn't hoarded. And as Adrienne Marie Brown writes, right now we're living in the pattern of excess. Capitalism creates excess wealth and poverty. It's the way the system is designed. It also shapes us toward constant wanting and consumption. Instead of being shaped to know what enough is and how to feel satisfaction, in this age of excess, it is easy to see our relationships with others as transactional, temporary, and disposable. Racialized capitalism in particular trains us to expect that some people fall through the cracks into unjust suffering. Our cultural individualism tells us this is acceptable as long as we aren't the ones at the bottom. As a model of humanity, this one is failing us, hurtling us toward extinction. And she writes that the way forward is to learn from within how to live lives of satisfaction. We must practice how to move from a deep, sated, and respectful relationship to ourselves in which we honestly articulate our needs and generate compassion for our choices into a deep, satisfiable, and respectful relationship to anyone else. Like Holmes argues, we have to work from the inside out. It starts within, and then it works through strengthening our relationships, through reaching across differences and creating bridges, not shying away from our discomfort, but rather leaning into it. I love Kentucky, y'all, but I'm allergic to everything that grows here. When I was working as a health services researcher, which I did for many years in California, I was invited to be part of a project that was interviewing men living in sheltered housing about whether or not they would be willing to try an HIV vaccine. And I was working on what's called Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. It's an area that covers 50 city blocks that is home to roughly 10,000 unhoused people. It's the largest concentration of unhoused people in the country. Some people live on the streets, and some people live in temporary housing. I said yes, but I was terrified. I viewed those people on Skid Row as scary, dirty, smelly. I was afraid I would be attacked, threatened. I'd heard stories, like we all have, about homeless people, drug addicts, mentally ill. What I discovered was people. People with needs, wants, and desires. People who want to be loved, valued, and cared for. I met Frank, who'd been wrongfully incarcerated for 20 years, and even after being released, no one would give him a job. I met Joe, who had been in and out of rehab and had a drug problem and couldn't stay sober and clean, and so ended up homeless because his family didn't want him. I met another man who was gay and whose family disowned him. Many, many stories, but these were all people, right? Complicated, complex people worthy of love and caring, discarded by a society that believes only some people are worthy of care. If we want a world that works for everyone, we have to look within to the ways we create division within ourselves and others. And if we hope to strengthen the net of our society, we need to strengthen the bonds between each pair and group of individuals. What we want is a net so strong, so satisfying that no one can fall through it. A healed society would be one in which no one becomes the bearer of unjust hardship, where individuals don't bear the weight of systemic failures. You know, I read a story this morning that on one level was really heartwarming and another level to me was terrifying. It was about an 88-year-old man who works full-time because he has to, whose wife died 7 years ago from an illness, who worked for GM for his entire career, retired, and then GM went bankrupt, took away his pension, and took away his health care. So at 88, he's working 5 days a week. Somebody found him from an organization. They did a GoFundMe and raised over $1 million for this man so he could retire. And that's a really heartwarming story about what somebody did for one person. But think about what it means that we as a society are willing to allow this man to suffer, to allow his wife to die because she couldn't get the health care she needed. What does that say about us as a people and what we value? In 1959, Ernest Holmes gave a talk at Asilomar called Sermon by the Sea. And toward the end of the talk, he said, how important it is that each one of us, in our own simple way, shall live from the divine to the divine, with the divine, in the divine, and to each other, to truly recognize the divine in one another, and to recognize that what lives in me lives in you, to recognize we each want to be loved for who we are, to belong, to feel we are a part of something greater than ourselves, is to begin the work of creating a world that works for everyone. We begin not by grand gestures, but as Brown reminds us, by being in a practice of curiosity as often as possible when entering into and developing relationships with others. Let yourself be surprised by the person in front of you, rather than constantly comparing them to limited colonial ideas of what their race, ethnicity, gender, class, ability, or other constructed stereotype is cast to be like. Be willing to admit when you're wrong about someone or something. Be willing to make amends. Be willing to set healthy boundaries, and above all, be gentle and willing with yourself. Be willing to be gobsmacked by the world. Changing the world and creating a world where each of us is valued sounds lofty, but it is made up not of grand gestures, but of small, intentional acts over time. What we each do matters. Abraham Joshua Heschel, a rabbi, philosopher, and a leader in the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, wrote, "The great challenge does not lie in organizing solemn demonstrations, but in how we manage the commonplace. The prophet's field of concern is not the mysteries of heaven, the glories of eternity, but the blights of society, the affairs of the marketplace. It is how we act every day. Every moment we have an opportunity to move toward a more just, sustainable, kind world, or to move toward restriction and injustice. The choice is ours." And I'll leave you with these words from Ernest Holmes from a radio address he gave in August 1950, where he was talking about, in part, the formation of the United Nations and also the danger of the beginning of the Korean War. And he said that which was born in faith must be kept through faith. As never before, our thoughts, our meditations, our hopes, and our prayers must rise in one common accord. And you and I should form the habit of taking definite time each day to pray for peace with justice, for there is no peace possible without justice. We should take time each day to pray, to know, and to meditate on the thought, and to meditate affirmatively with complete acceptance that our leaders everywhere are being guided by the all-sustaining wisdom and upheld by the all-assuming power of good. And we should pray for the peace of our own minds, that we shall not become confused. But we should not only pray, we should act, each contributing the best they have to the common purpose, each willing to make any sacrifice necessary, not a sacrifice reluctantly made, but as one who offers all they have for two great purposes. One, in a certain sense, a selfish one, for we all desire self-preservation, but the other in the greater sense, that there could be no individual self-preservation without the preservation of all. Let's go into prayer. So I just take that moment to anchor into that knowingness. There's only one divine essence that is in, through, and as all that exists. The only reality that is formless, changeless, yet ever-changing, that exists in the multiplicity of all. The grand diversity of the universe is part and parcel of that one life. And in this moment, I know it as love, as wholeness, as order, as peace, as justice, knowing that whatever is the truth of the one is the truth of me, is the truth of each beloved hearing my voice. And I speak this word this morning for this community, for this world, knowing that wholeness is the truth, that we are each whole no matter what. There is nothing about us, no thought, no idea, no physical condition that can change the perfect wholeness that we are. For we are that divine essence personified, walking this earth in beautiful and magnificent ways. That we each come here with a gift that is freely given, the gift of love, and that we each come here simply looking at each other as the divine, remembering that no one is unworthy in the eyes of God, that no one deserves to be discarded, for we each the most precious and beloved of the one. And I affirm for us here today a world that indeed does work for everyone, where all are valued for who they are. A world of love, of generosity, of kindness, of reciprocity. A place where we are sustained and held and loved the way we are. And so knowing that, and for speaking this word, I give thanks. And I simply release this into the law, knowing it is so. And so it is.